And so the reframe in having courage is to have skin in the game. Sometimes in life we can be an observer and watch things go by, but the moment we have skin in the game, the moment something is important to us, then that's when we find our voice and we say, okay, so the awareness to say, well, what's important to me? Where do I have skin in the game? And then the self-regulation to say, how do I speak up?
Let's talk courageous communication today with Andrew Bryant. How do we wake up more so that we can live and work with intentionality and influence so that we can create an impact and achieve our objectives? This is the mission that Andrew Bryant is on. He is a speaker, coach, and author, and a global thought leader on the topic of self-leadership and how it applies to leadership as well. So let's hear and learn from Andrew about how to lead ourselves more courageously in our lives and in our work. Welcome, Andrew. It's so great to have you here on Let's Talk Communication. I've been actually meaning to get you on to talk about self-leadership for a while now. We met decades ago, I think it was, and I've watched you like unfold in terms of your coaching and that, and really always been interested in your take on self-leadership. So maybe we should just start there. Is like what do you actually mean by self-leadership, and why is it even important for us to be exploring?
Okay, well, nice to see you. It has been a long time, and it is decades. I can't actually remember the year that we met. I've been talking about self-leadership since the 1990s, from before we met. And the definition for me has evolved. I actually thought I'd invented the term. I was using it in the late 90s, 98, 99. And then I subsequently discovered that somebody had used it in 1987, a gentleman by the name of Charles Mance. And he described it as a process of self-influence. With my co-author of the 2012 book on self-leadership, Dr. Anna Kazan, we defined self-leadership as the practice of intentionally influencing your thinking, feeling, and actions towards your objectives. So we expanded the definition, and if you Google the definition, typically you get ours because it's a published work. And the important thing in deconstructing this is it is a practice of. Just like taking a shower in the morning is a practice. If you don't shower for a couple of days, you certainly stink. If you don't practice to intentionally influence your thinking and feeling and actions, then metaphorically, your attitude will stink. And we know that our thoughts can run away from us. We can have a recurrent thought, like we can have an earworm of a piece of music that we heard and we keep playing. We can either have a positive recurring thought or a negative recurring thought. We can have a recurring emotion. We can have a sense that something that continues to eat away at us. Self-leadership is important because it's the practice of intentionally influencing those thoughts and feelings so that we are the driver of our life rather than the passenger. And it's important because so much of our life is programmed from our DNA, our early upbringing, our early schooling, our early experiences program and prime us to react and respond in certain ways. If we want to live our life rather than somebody else's, then we have to practice intentionally influencing our thinking, feeling, and actions, and have objectives. We have to have outcomes, what we're moving towards. So that's why it's important.
Very much. So what is the components then are being able to intentionally manage your thinking, your feeling, and your behaving, those kind of three aspects.
Yes.
Yeah, you call it for to influence ourselves. So how do we develop it then? What are those things we should be doing? Is it just about being aware and intentional in every aspect of your day, which is very difficult to do?
Well, setting an intention operates at an unconscious level. So once we've set the intention, it will continue to be there. Let's say you set an intention to move house, right? So you go, I want to move house, or I want to move apartment. And then lo and behold, everything you look at, every conversation you have is around opportunities to see a new house or a new apartment, right? So once that intention is set, your brain is constantly searching for those things. But self-awareness, as you articulate, is the place we start. But there are three components to self-leadership: self-awareness, self-regulation, or self-management, and self-learning. So intention is slightly different from self-management. So it's actually quite difficult to manage our thoughts. Because thoughts and feelings come. We can have the best intention, but somebody cuts in front of us in traffic, we're still going to get angry, right? Somebody pushes in front of us in the queue at the supermarket, we're still going to respond. We might not say anything, but we're going to have that response. So it starts with self-awareness, which is recognizing that we need to be mindful, which is obviously a big word these days, being mindful. What am I thinking? What am I feeling about this? How am I reacting? And noting that. And the practical tip for most people is, if you've not practiced journaling, then start today. If you've not practiced capturing your thoughts and capturing your day. So the intention might start in the morning. You're having your shower, brushing your teeth, and you say, okay, today my intention is to achieve the following, or be the best version of myself. And then at the end of the day, writing down, well, how did that go? What did I do well? What did I flunk at? What could I do better at? What am I grateful for? These are things to reflect, and that builds our self-awareness and our self-monitoring. Once we have self-awareness, then we can self-regulate. So if we notice that we have a pattern of setting an intention to do something, we don't do that, we need to regulate to have things around us to make that easy. So let's use the obvious one of exercise, right? So if we say, I set an intention to exercise, right? Well, you wake up in the morning, it's cold, you decide to hit the snooze button and stay in bed for another 30 minutes. Well, your self-regulation wasn't very good. So you recognize that as a pattern, and you say, okay, so I'm going to regulate this by having my running shoes and my sports equipment by my bed, so that when the alarm goes off, I can pull back the covers and go straight into my shoes and out for a run. And so as your self-awareness then moves into a self-regulation, you go out for your run or your walk, whatever you decided to do. And now you've got a self-learning loop. You said, okay, well, I did that, it worked. And then that reinforces the new behavior. So you've used the three pillars of self-leadership there: awareness, regulation, and self-learning. And you've discovered, maybe you discovered that the route that you chose was not appropriate. So you adjust that for next time and choose a different route. And that's the way we constantly improve.
And a very useful way, very useful loop to be using. So I've got a big interest in being more courageous in our lives, and especially in how we communicate, how we express ourselves. So I was wondering how the self-leadership, this power of influencing our thoughts, feelings, and actions can help us achieve being more courageous. So maybe just being braver in our lives, doing something we're scared of, but then also I want to look then more in the communication side.
Okay, so if you pose that to me as a question, and I'm wearing my coaching hat, I would say, okay, so firstly, let's define what courageous means to you. And now, to me, courageous means feeling the fear and doing it anyway, right?
Yes.
So, and I think you're agreeing with me there. So the self-awareness is, well, what is the fear, right? When I'm not courageous to speak up, to articulate, to communicate, if I'm not having my voice heard, what is preventing me doing that? So that's where the awareness starts. What's the inner voice saying? Oh, it's dangerous to speak up. It could be a career limiting move. Or what if I speak up and they don't like what I say? And so reframing those things as, everybody has a perspective. That doesn't mean it's the truth, but your perspective has value. So I would use an analogy perhaps in reframing somebody and say, look, let's say you're the front seat passenger in a car, and you look over at the driver and the driver's eyes are starting to close and the car is crossing the center line into oncoming traffic, would you have the courage to speak up? Well, of course you would, because you've got skin in the game, right? You're going to go, hey, wake up, should we pull over for a coffee, right? And so the reframe in having courage is to have skin in the game. Sometimes in life we can be an observer and watch things go by, but the moment we have skin in the game, the moment something is important to us, then that's when we find our voice and we say, okay, so the awareness to say, well, what's important to me? Where do I have skin in the game? And then the self-regulation to say, how do I speak up, right? And do I speak up in a passive way, an aggressive way, or perhaps more effectively an authentic or an assertive way, and say, look, I hear that this is what you need, want, and believe, and this is what I need, want, and believe. Now, the barrier, I mean, I lived in Asia for 18 years, and a lot of people didn't want to speak up because they valued humility. So we have to reframe humility. What does humility mean? Well, it comes from the Latin humilitas, which means ground or dirt. So it means we're grounded. And humility means having an accurate, neither overestimated nor underestimated view of your own abilities. And it means the ability to consider other people's perspectives as equally valid as your own. So why a lot of people don't have the courage to speak up, because they think speaking up will put them immediately into conflict. Whereas if we can say, okay, I'm hearing this is your perspective, this is your thoughts, your feelings, your beliefs, and these are my thoughts, feelings, and beliefs. How can we collaborate and work together? And so the courage comes from knowing that when we speak up, we have that opportunity for collaboration, that we're not breaching our humility and being arrogant. We are being authentic and saying, well, this is my perspective, and everybody deserves a perspective. So that's how I approach that.
That's very useful. And because a lot of it, when I speak about courage, is there's purpose involved in it. The moment we, as you say, there's something really important to us, that's when our courage is activated. If it wasn't important, we wouldn't need to act or speak up.
Yeah.
So
I mean, there's a saying, it's not my circus, it's not my monkeys, right? Which is, I'm not getting involved in that. So that's not, that's not mine. And so people get, you might be at a dinner party and two people are arguing politics, and it's not important to you because neither of them is, whatever you say, neither of them is going to listen, and nobody's beliefs are going to change. And so you go, you know what, I choose not to engage in that. Whereas you might be in conversation with a loved one around something which, very relevant today. Should you be vaccinated? Should you not be vaccinated? And you might care about that person and say, look, I want to listen to your perspective. I want to understand what your fears and anxieties are, because I'd like to share my perspective and my experience. Is that okay for you? Because it would matter because you cared about that individual. Mm. So choosing, and again, this is being intentional. Where do you want to engage? Now, for me, my whole modus operandi, my whole why that I exist is that I see myself as a catalyst for change. As a coach, as a facilitator, as a writer, I want to wake people up to their own leadership, their leadership of self and their leadership of others. And so if I don't say something, I'm not living my purpose. So I have to have the courage. Does that rub a few people up the wrong way? Absolutely. Do I occasionally get, a nasty message on social media? Yes, of course I do. But that's more about them than it is about me. And so I continue to have the courage to speak my perspective, and hopefully that reaches the audience that it needs to.
Out of interest also, how do you handle then when someone does come back at you where they don't like your perspective, or it does seem to create some kind of conflict? I know the one thing you said is understanding that it says more about them than anything about you. But is there anything else that assists you to just handle that negative backlash?
Well, it's just knowing that their response to me is a reflection of them. My response to them will be a reflection of me. So this is the opportunity for self-leadership. I could react and go, if somebody doesn't like it and I could go tell them to jump off a cliff, right? But then I'm being as reactive. For me, it's a mindset of curiosity. You know, okay, that's interesting that you reacted that way. It's interesting that you responded that way. Do you mind if I ask you some questions to clarify where you're coming from? And as we know, most people are desperate to be understood and to be heard. So instead of reacting, taking a moment of curiosity, and often they just got the wrong end of the stick. They projected their view. It wasn't actually what I was saying at all. It wasn't my intention. Now, sometimes I might have to backstep and say, you know what? This was my intention. Perhaps I articulated that ineffectively or crudely. Would you give me the opportunity to say it a different way? And often that's it. I mean, for us to have healthy conflict, and I'm a great believer in healthy conflict. I mean, the work I do is with senior executive leadership teams. They're always in conflict, but that conflict isn't a problem providing that there's a level of trust. So, you know, the damage comes, you know, social media, of course, is there's no trust because people are anonymous or millions of miles away. But if you can create a level of trust and say, you know, I'm prepared to listen to you, I want to hear your viewpoint, then the law of reciprocity then kicks in. They kind of have to listen to you back. So that's how I handle that. Now, as a human being, when somebody, you know, says something nasty about me on social media or to my face, of course, there's the moment of, you know, the heckles go back. I'm a big guy. I'm bald. You know, I could, if coaching doesn't work out for me, I could get a job as a nightclub bouncer. But I choose not to go there. Now, a younger version of me, a 2.0, 3.0, might have been a bit more aggressive. But the things I've learned, the things I've developed, the journey I've been on allows me to go, okay, that's not about me. That's about them. How can I understand them? And that, of course, is the practice of self-leadership, knowing that I could react, I could be aggressive, and knowing that I need to regulate that, and the self-learning that doesn't work out, and the self-learning that when I do listen and when I do question and I do stay curious, that works better. So that is the loop of self-leadership and how I've applied it in my courageous communication.
Absolutely, and then it led me to a thought. So we're speaking a lot about self-leadership, which is how we manage ourselves. Would you say that's something we need to work on before we can manage or lead others? Because if you work so much with leaders, a lot of people just focus on leading.
Yeah. Well, that's a softball question for me, because the answer is clearly you can't lead others unless you first lead yourself. So thank you for the question. What I would say, though, is that it's not necessarily sequential. Yes, we need to work on ourselves. However, it's a lifelong journey. The two things happen in parallel, right? So we might start in our organization as an individual contributor, and then we're only leading ourselves. But then quickly we're part of a team, and so we're collaborating. And so we're still leading and influencing members of our team, even if we don't have hierarchical authority over them. Then we become a supervisor or a team leader, and then we become a manager. And so actually your self-leadership gets stretched as you go up the leadership ladder, right? So self-leadership it's not, I do my self-leadership, then I lead others. I start with my self-leadership and then I continue. So I work with self-leadership with CEOs of organizations, and the good ones are still growing and learning to be better versions of themselves. And as new challenges face them, the last 2 years, it's been really interesting working with C-level leaders who, as the pandemic hit, they themselves were in fear and anxiety and personalizing and saying, why is this about me? Why is this happening to me? And having to get them to transcend that so that they could then lead their teams and influence and inspire their teams. So self-leadership doesn't stop. It's as I said, it's a practice. It's like taking a shower. I'm supposedly, having written 2 books on self-leadership, the self-leadership guru. Does that mean I have perfect self-leadership at all times? No, just go ask my wife, who will periodically, when I'm losing the plot, say, go self-leadership yourself, which of course is pretty tough. So this is, yes, we, as each new challenge occurs in our lives, we are going to need to dig deeper and become better versions of ourselves. But that's exciting. We discover that we're capable of more than we ever imagined. I mean, look what we've just got through the last 2 years. Would we imagine we'd have been able to do that? No. Look what we're about to go through now. The globe again is in conflict, and we will get through this. We are, all of us listening to this podcast, survivors of our worst ever day, right? And we're still here. And so if we've survived that, what else can we survive? So the issue with self-leadership is not just surviving, but thriving. The self-learning, do I need to repeat the same lesson over and over again? Or have I learned that? Now, let me go learn something new.
So that touches a little bit on failure. So I just wondered what your thoughts were, because there's such a big fear of failure, especially in my country. We've grown up with failing is just not acceptable at all. You're so shunned, and hence a lot of people are very reluctant to start businesses or to, take a step and put themselves out there. So is there anything else you can add in that from the self-leadership perspective would help us to overcome that fear of failing?
Well, I started talking about self-leadership as a feed-forward loop. We
Yes.
set an intention, we take an action, we get feedback. There's a 3-letter acronym that I teach my coaching clients, which is the 3 A's: accept, adjust, and advance. So we accept what happens. We set off with a positive intention. We want it to work. Nobody sets out to have a failure. However, failure is baked into the system, right? If you do anything for the first time, there's bound to be an element of an adjustment that's required. It's like sailing a boat across a harbor. You might set your intention to reach a certain landmark, but the wind and the waves and obstacles will mean that you're going to have to adjust your course to get there. So failure is baked in, and to assume that we're going to do anything perfect the first time is paralyzing. You wouldn't try anything. You would only do the things that you've successfully done in the past. And if you want to live in the past and some people's psychometric is very traditional. They just want to repeat last year again and again and again. But if you are wanting to journey to new lands and new opportunities and new experiences, you're going to try things and you will fail. The question is the failure permanent? I have a mantra that keeps me going, which is there is no failure, only feedback for improvement. And recognizing that the failure is around the action. It isn't who I am as a human being. And Martin Seligman, one of the founders of the positive psychology movement, said, if you're going to be depressed, make it personal, make it pervasive, and make it permanent. And sorry, I got an echo there. So for me, failure isn't personal. I am a work in progress. I'm 60 years old, so I call myself, this is version 6.0. And I don't make the same mistakes that I made as version 2.0 and 3.0, thank God. But I'm going to make mistakes in version 6.0, and I'm going to work on improving those. So the trick is to not make it personal. I took an action. That action wasn't perfect. I can adjust and I can advance. It's not about me. It's about the action. And if you can separate that, and sometimes people need some coaching. A mantra that I share, particularly with the women leaders that I coach, is I have nothing to prove, only things to improve. And why that's such a great and effective mantra is it doesn't say I'm perfect, because we get a cognitive disconnect if we say, I'm amazing, I'm wonderful, I'm rich, I'm powerful, because that's not true. Those things are all transient. But the I have nothing to prove says, yes, I'm worthy. It's a self-esteem mantra. I'm worthy. I've got nothing to prove. I'm here. I've survived, as I said, but I'm not perfect. I'm work in progress. I've got things to improve. And I think that's great, because it says, if I try something and it's not perfect, it's okay. I can improve it. And it doesn't take away from me, because I've got nothing to prove, because I turned up, I took action. Most people won't take action. Most people don't turn up. They're passive observers and they're missing out. So that's a mantra that is really practical and really helpful.
It is. Thank you. And you worded so well. I want to ask you something a bit personal now, that I ask most of my guests. When was the last time you had a courageous conversation, one that really counted? And what was it about, if you're willing to share?
Well, and for me, it's so recent. It happens all the time with my clients. So, I work with people who want to join the C-suite, and I work with people who are in the C-suite. The dangerous thing, of course, is for most people, the toughest conversation you're going to have is with your boss, because if that conversation goes wrong, it's a career limiting move. So, I mean, I just got back from the United States, where a conversation I had with a CEO whose company hires me and therefore is my boss because they are my client. And I had to tell the CEO that he was behaving in a power play way. There was a facilitation, and at every whiteboard, as we went around the whiteboards, he grabbed a pen, right? He grabbed the marker pen. And I said, dude, you don't have to grab the marker pen every time. He said, but I'm letting them talk. I'm being facilitative. I said, no, the moment you grab the marker, you took the leadership position, and that does unconsciously shut everybody down. And he's like, and he gave me the look, and I'm like, did I cross a bridge too far? Did I break the relation? And he went, okay, you're right. So that was the very last moment. Although this morning, I had to have the courage to challenge somebody who's about to step into a leadership position and say, look, we've just been through your psychometric. We've looked at your personality profile. You don't have the default personality for a leader. You're not extrovert. You're very reflective. You don't like conflict, and you're stepping into a leadership position. Do you really want to do this? Right? Okay.
Wow.
Because I mean, you really want, you want me to coach you to be a leader, but do you, let's first deal with this. Do you really? Because this is not going to be easy for you. It's not default for you. So that was a tough conversation to call somebody and say that. Again, that individual could fire me on the spot. So I have to go, I have to speak my truth, my authenticity, because that's my brand.
So what helps you to be courageous in those moments? Because you get right to the heart of it. It's a very confrontational, question. Do you really want this? As that person's about to embark on a big career move. What helps you to do that?
Because I don't have to please people. I have to be effective for people. So I think why people fail, and this individual that I just called him out was he was a people pleaser. He wanted to be nice, and of all the things people have accused me of, it's not being nice, right? I've got a big, the people that know me, I have a great friend who said, Andrew, to know you is to love you. And I went, well, thanks for that. Because a lot of people see me, and as I said, that the visage of the big guy with the bald head, some people misinterpret who I am and where I'm coming from. I have a big heart for people. And my heart comes from holding them accountable to be the best version of themselves. So I don't want to be nice. I don't want to tell you things that make you feel wonderful, but not allow you to move forwards. So my whole paradigm of my raison d'etre, my why, my purpose is to be a catalyst for change. And if I'm just being nice to you, what a nice comment. What a, nice just means ignorant. And the origin of the word, I wrote a blog post on this, why nice is holding you back. Nice comes from the Latin and the Old French, which means ignorant. When we're being nice, we're not telling the truth. And so this drive to be the best version of myself and to be the best version of myself in a relationship with somebody, that's what drives me to do that. And if that relationship is broken because of that, then it wasn't a relationship in the first place, was it?
Oh, so sure. I had a question there. So for you, then that being real and authentic is very important, as well as being truthful. So it's not about being nice and pleasing someone else. And a relationship should be able to withstand that.
Yeah.
So that's what the question is coming back to me now. So in that context, I think the context is also very important when it comes to communicating. It obviously with a client, you've already set up that context, the frame, so that you can challenge. You have a rapport already.
Yes.
So any tips for someone who's new to this, who's on the verge of developing, finding their voice and speaking up more? Some just pointers around skills to develop.
Well, you raise a very important point. I mean, context for self-leadership is everything, because I mean, self-leadership in North Korea is going to be very different from self-leadership in, North Carolina or North Swakopmund or something. I mean, sorry, wrong country.
South Africa, yes.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
You're in Spain, I think.
Yeah, well, contextually, so I do a lot of work. Self-leadership leads to executive presence. And I do a lot of work around helping people develop their executive presence, the ability to project their confidence and gravitas. The flip side of executive presence is the ability to read the room. And so when you have presence, you're reading that room. And remember, I said we have to have a curiosity. Where's the other person coming from? So if you speak your truth and say, hi, this is what I think, this is what I feel, this is what I believe, this is what I need, that's actually aggressive communication. Assertive or authentic communication is, here's what I need, want, believe. Let me understand what you need, want, and believe so that we can collaborate, or vice versa, asking them first. So that's where the rapport is reading the room in terms of what does this person need, want, believe. And then we can speak to that. So as you are familiar in communication, the frame in terms of, so, you and I are chatting, you ask me a question and I would say, Telana, in terms of us being on this podcast, here's what I would say to that. So I'm setting the frame and the context to my truth in terms of this environment that you and I are on a podcast together, right? Yeah. You set a frame and said, I want to ask you something personal. I asked that of all my guests. So you framed that this was going to be a personal question. You wanted a personal answer. And you also generalized it to say, I ask all my guests, which puts me under a little bit of a requirement to join the club and share with you. So you framed the question, right? You let me know. You didn't just leap out and ask me something personal without pre-framing it to let me know that's coming. I mean, if you asked me something otherwise personal, if you'd asked me, am I a brief or a boxer guy, and that came out of the blue, I'd be like, well, hang on a moment, that's a little bit too personal for a podcast. So now your audience are going to wonder if I'm a brief or a boxer guy, but
they are. We'll let them wonder.
That's not getting answered on this. It's not appropriate for this context.
Context. But how can people get hold of you if they want to learn more about self-leadership or just follow your journey?
Well, that's easy. Self-leadership's the brand. So selfleadership.com is the website. Selfleadership.tv is the YouTube channel. And so those are the two easiest places to go. YouTube and there. On LinkedIn, I'm Andrew Bryant. On Twitter, I'm Self-Leadership, although the Twitter's not really my stream. It's more YouTube, lots of videos on the things that you and I have talked to on the YouTube channel. So you can search Andrew Bryant or Self-Leadership on YouTube, or the shortcut is selfleadership.tv.
The question I like to end off with is what is the conversation that you believe we need to be having more of today that would make the world a better place?
Well, that is a good question. And maybe I would have appreciated, unfortunately, I didn't get your email. I would have loved to have thought about that one. The reaction that I have here is, the question we have is, why are we so divisive? Right? What we're seeing in the world with nationalism, with left versus right, is everybody's triggered and therefore escalating so quickly. We're getting into tit for tat arguments. So the conversation that we should be having is, what do we have in common rather than what do we have that separates us? And I watch American politics. I was going to move to the United States. I decided against it. I'm in Portugal now. And, it really worries me how the media has become so divisive. And I would love to have the conversation. Okay, so, Mr. Politician on the right or Mr. Politician on the left, what do you both have in common? Well, you're both Americans, right? So there's more that there's more that connects you than divides you, right? So this is the conversation that we need to be having. We're so busy being polarized, and yet I was impressed with the mythologist Joseph Campbell, and paraphrasing him, he referenced December 24th, 1968. And on December 24th, 1968, Apollo 8 came around the moon and took that iconic photograph of Earthrise. We see the surface of the moon and we see our beautiful blue-green planet up there in the sky. And Campbell articulated that all of Earth's religions have an upward orientation to our God or gods. We look up to the heavens for our inspiration from our deities. For the first time on December the 24th, 1968, we got a God's eye view. We got the fifth perspective, as you would say in neurolinguistic programming. You look down on this planet, this blue-green planet, and we should, as a species, had an epiphany. One tribe, one planet, one future. And yet that was 1968. It's 2022, and it's almost as if we've gone backwards, that we're disappearing into our little tribes, our little caves, and everybody is the other. And so the conversation that I want to have is, what is driving you to be separate when there's more that connects us than differentiates us? And that's the conversation. Why is it that you want to put up the walls of your little, your nation and then your village, and realizing that all human experience is when we connect one-to-one with somebody else? And so that's the big why for me. What's driving this separation, and how can we connect? And so that's what I ask of everybody that I'm talking to, how can we connect? What do we have in common?
Sure, I think that'd be a very powerful answer and focus. And so if we set that as an intention and then self-lead around that intention and lead others as well, things could be very different in this world.
Well, here's hoping.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Andrew. I really enjoyed sharing some thoughts with you and learning from you. So thank you so much for your time. If there's anything else you want to add?
No, absolutely. Well, the two books of self-leadership are there. So there's plenty of research you can do. I've got a new book coming out this month, the new leadership playbook. So I've applied the self-leadership methodology in how you manage people, particularly in these new and challenging times with having to lead people through Zoom and other things. So that book, I'm excited. It's been 2 years in the making, so I'm looking forward to that. And so you'll see me talking a lot about the new leadership playbook. That's my thing at the moment.
Well, super. Maybe we'll get you back on to talk some more when the book's available. But I'll put all that in your profile links to the podcast, put links to your book.
Okay. All the best, Telana. It's great to see you, and all the best and great success for you and your podcast in South Africa.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for listening to Let's Talk Courageous Communication. As you may have noticed, I've added the word courageous now into this podcast because there's a huge aspect now of my work is around helping people to live more courageously in their lives, and especially in their communication. You can see more about this in Bravery School. That's CRZA, my school where I'm helping people to develop their courage, their capacity for courage, and also their applying it to speaking up and living more courageously. And what's really important is self-leadership in this journey. It's a whole module that we do. And hence, Andrew really reinforced, I think, added a whole lot of dimension to our learning in how to be more courageous in this world. So to find out more, you can go to innercoaching.co.za/talk communication. Thanks for listening, and go now and be courageous.